Hi, my name is Dave Carroll, and I'm going to show you the basics of using the Force.com Toolkit for Adobe Air and Flex. And to do that, we're going to start at developer.force.com and download the toolkit. So we go to Technical Library and click on Tools. This takes us to the page that has all the tools available on the platform. We'll scroll down to Other Integration Libraries, and you see the Force.com Toolkit for Adobe Air and Flex here. So we go ahead and click on that. That takes us to a page that gives us a nice description of the toolkit as well as other resources for using the toolkit. And we're just going to go ahead and download the latest build here from CodeShare. Now this takes us to our CodeShare site where we can view the source code. This is hosted on Google Code. And in addition to the source code, we have a download here. This download is the toolkit itself, contained in a zip file that includes source libraries as well as the compiled libraries. So let's go ahead and view that download now. And you can see there's our source folder, and we also have our bin folder, which contains the compiled SWICs that we'll use for creating an Air app on Force.com. What I'd like to do now that I've got the library is switch over to Flex Builder. And what I'm going to do is create a new project. I'm going to select Air as the project type, give it a name, creative name of demo, and just click Finish, accepting all the other defaults. So now that I've got my project created, what I want to do is add the libraries for the toolkit. So I'll switch back over to my file folder system, grab those two libraries, and drag them into my libs folder inside my project. I now have all the code necessary to begin creating my application. So the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and reference the Air connection object. This is our main interface into the toolkit, and I'm going to give it an ID, which is going to be, in this case, Force. Once I've got that, I'm pretty much ready to go. We'll create a UI now, a very simple UI using a data grid. Just drop that on there. Resize it to the edges of the screen. Set some constraints so that it behaves well. And go back to the source. Now, once my data grid is created, I actually don't need these columns, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove that. And now I'm ready to begin interacting with the toolkit on my application. I want something to happen when the application is done loading, so I'm going to hook the application complete event and call a function called init. So let's go ahead and write that init function. We're going to create a private function, init, which returns a void. Now to log, first thing we need to do is log in, and we're going to do that using a login request object. This is part of the toolkit. And so we'll instantiate that login request. And then the next thing we want to do is set some parameters to verify our credentials. And we'll do that by setting the username. This is the username that you use to log into Salesforce.com or your developer edition. And then a password. And then the next thing that we need to do is create what's called an async responder. Now the toolkit runs asynchronously, and that means that when the call is made and the response is received, we need to specify a function to be called to handle that, that result. So we're going to do that by setting the callback property to a new async responder. And it's important to select the Salesforce.com responder, not the standard mx.rpc one. And in this responder, we're going to specify the name of a function to call when the result comes back. This will be called loadGrid in our case. And now we're ready to call the login. So we can do force.login and pass in our login request. So let's go ahead and create the loadGrid function. This is a simple function that will receive a login result from the application. It's going to be a void function. And what we're going to do in this function is simply turn around and call the query method on the toolkit to retrieve some data. So we'll do force.query, enter a query string, first name and last name, and we're going to get that from our contact table. And then, like the login, we also need an async responder. So we'll create a new async responder. And in this case, we'll just put a function in line. This responder is going to receive a query result object, which is the object that's returned from our query operation. So we'll just select that. Again, void. And now we're going to take and set the grid data provider to be the records returned on this query. One thing that I didn't do that I'll need to do is go ahead and give my grid an ID. You can see that we're referencing it by my grid here. So let's go ahead and put an ID here. And now I should have everything I need to run my air application. So we'll go ahead and click Save. Just double check that we haven't got any problems. Nope, everything compiles fine. And so now we can go ahead and run it. I'm going to run it in debug mode. And there's the application. So I've logged in and selected all my data. We can see by looking at the console that we are caching this in the local database. So the way that the toolkit works is whenever you specify a query, unless you have designated more control, it's going to create the table in the database and save the results of that query there, as well as bring it to your application. So this is the very basics of getting started using the Flex Toolkit or Force.com toolkit for Adobe Air and Flex. There's a lot more that you can do with this. Hopefully this will get you started in the right direction. Thank you for listening, and happy coding.